What's something you saw as a kid that looked harmless, but if you witnessed it now it would horrify you? When I was a kid I remember riding around on the back of this ATV in this sort of homemade buggy slash trailer. Our school was volunteering to set things up for a marathon, if I recall correctly. Anyways, I remember watching some of the older guys jump off while the ATV was still moving, and being young wanting to emulate them, I tried doing it. I remember catching my foot on this rock, falling, rolling, and people screaming. I got up embarrassed and just sort of shook it off. Didn't understand why the older people were shaken. Didn't remotely grasp the fact that the rubber of the wheel was touching my face, about to use my head as a speed bump. Looking back, that driver had some incredible reflexes. Super thankful for that. I've always loved the tranquil feeling of being underwater. When I was a kid I would just hold my breath and float around. Sometimes adults would think I was drowning and run up and scoop me out. I don't remember this, it was when I was pretty young, but my parents have told me about it. I used to think it was a funny story. People thinking I was drowning when I was just trying to relax, until I watched a video explaining child drownings, and yeah, the way I acted in water looked exactly like a drowned kid. I don't think it's funny anymore. Floodwater. It was fun and games for the kids, and we even splashed around in it, much to the horror of our parents, who immediately scrubbed us down. We didn't understand then, but now, oh wow, sewer, insects, rats, parasites, etc. My friend and I were walking along the road in about thigh-high floodwaters. A small boat with 2 men comes up to us. We were about 9 years old, and I think they were National Guard. Anyway, one of the men asks if we remembered exactly where the manholes in the road were. We answered no. He told us that all of the covers had most likely been washed away in the flood, but not to worry, because it would probably only take them a few days to find our bodies if we were sucked down one of the holes by currents they produced. He spoke in a matter-of-fact tone and then left. As an adult, I have zeroed out those 2 men had a good laugh as they looked back and watched us snoop out of that water like 2 roadrunners in a cartoon. Edit, it was fish and game wardens. The NG didn't come until later. I have a childhood memory of my dad acting weird, stumbling and falling around the house, and saying bizarre things that didn't make any sense. I thought it was duckin' hilarious as a kid that he was being goofy and silly. I now know he was high as balls on Percocet. This hits home. I remember back in high school we used to laugh at my father while he stumbled and slurred words at night from drinking. Held a good job and didn't have any issues on a day-to-day basis. He was a highly functioning alcoholic. 20 years later, he's in his 60s and he's still an alcoholic, but no longer highly functioning. His body can't handle the alcohol anymore. He's just began a road to recovery, but hasn't been doing well with it. It's rough. Had a jogger get hit by a car outside my house once when I was about 8 or 9. My nephew came running inside yelling at my parents and my sister to call the ambulance because he was bleeding pretty badly. I could even see him from our playroom's window and I wondered what he was doing lying on the grass. Turns out he was bleeding out pretty badly, deliriously yelling at my parents when they tried to help. Eventually, an ambulance came and picked him up, but my parents always told me he made it out okay. The day after, in the spot he was found, someone had put a lily in the grass in a vase. It took me longer than I care to admit to figure out he died from the hit and run. I have one that is tragic. When I was 12 I had a friend who was abusive to his little brothers. It never clicked to me, we just thought it was sibling fun, albeit he was a little meaner. Well, he had a toddler brother. One day I was at his house with him alone while he was babysitting his toddler brother. At one point, he was playing with his brother, and then he stopped and looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you tell anyone about this, I will kill you." He proceeded to pull his brother's diaper down and perform fellatio on him. I was horrified. We left and it shook me for a long while. I told my closest friends and we all knew it was wrong, but we honestly thought more about how that made our friend gay. Honestly, that was our biggest concern. I know it sounds stupid and ducked up, but we were just like, yo, X is gay man, you won't believe what he did. I kept the secret, except for telling my best friend, for maybe a few months, and then I was peer pressured into telling one of the popular kids of the school. The rumor mill went into full swing, and within a day or two the entire school was talking about it. At this point, I was terrified of getting into trouble. I was called into the principal's office in the afternoon and absolutely grilled. I remember how mean she was, and how much I was crying. They made me write down what happened. Even still, I thought I was getting in trouble for being a snitch and spreading rumors. It was only until many years later that I understood this was child abuse and would prompt an investigation. And that the principal was grilling me to see if I was telling the truth. I didn't understand the concept of child abuse or what was happening. I just knew it was wrong and that my friend was gay, and that was the extent of it. We had a high school teacher who would flirt with the girls. Stand at their desks with his one foot up on the seat, basically putting his crotch in their face. Everyone just laughed at it and made fun of him behind his back. Only now do I see what a creep he was. When I was in high school, I got off the bus behind a kid I had known since middle school. We were walking to go inside when he just suddenly collapsed in front of me, smacked right into the pavement and started seizing. I knew something was bad wrong, but I thought he would end up being okay. He died in the hospital the next day because of bleeding in his brain. I knew when it happened that it was really ducked up, that I saw that, but I never realized how disturbing it is until I got older. Now it really makes me upset. I have memories of him from middle school, and he was just such a sweet and kind kid. He died freshman year, and they had a moment of silence for him at our graduation. It was very sad. When I was around 5 years old, I was in the mall with my mom and her boyfriend. We were in a Radio Shack store, and I was sitting at a computer checking it out. An older man walked up to the computer next to me to look at it, and next thing I knew he collapsed and landed on top of me across my lap. My mother's boyfriend ran over cause he thought he was being weird or something, but apparently he had a heart attack and died. I remember them pulling him off me, and the paramedics showing up and us leaving. A kid ducking sharpened his fingers with an automatic pencil sharpener at grade 2. Everyone didn't know what was going on until the teacher started freaking out. I just remembered I tried to stick my finger into electric pencil sharpeners as a kid and disliked how my fingers were too big to fit in it. What the hell was I thinking? My grandma would save time by blow drying my hair when I was still in the bath. WTF was she an escapade crew? This comment has me in tears. When I was in 6th grade, a girl showed up to school with a Tinkerbell tattoo on her hip. In our child brains, we found this very mature and grown up, that her parents had let a family member tattoo her. Looking back at it now, it's concerning that anyone would sign off on a tattoo for a 10/11-year-old. Same thing happened at my school. In 6th grade, a girl came to school, and while changing for gym she showed off a big tattoo that said "Daddy's little girl" on her barely developed breast. She turned out okay, but you can still see the tattoo in pictures she posts on Facebook, and I cringe just thinking about it. That's more concerning than the original post. The VHS store that my parents went to had an awesome playroom hidden in the back. Was it a sex dungeon kind of playroom or a child abduction playroom? Child pornography room? We used to jump off our roof. First time hurt a little, but after a few times you learned how to land. Did it regularly and would try various items as parachutes to see if it slows you down any. I look at that height now and wonder how the hell we never broke anything. Kids' bones are more elastic, I guess. My mom did this as a kid. She was always getting into stuff she shouldn't have been, so ended up hurting herself quite badly a few times and trying to hide it. She was jumping off the roof with her cousins and using a towel as a parachute. Unfortunately, she got a little too close to the building and an nail end sticking out got her on the way down. I'm not sure how far into herself she ripped in the bum from memory, but this was in a time when you didn't go to the hospital for anything. Rural America, people who had grown up in the Depression with no jobs or affordable healthcare. Did climbing in pet 6th to 8th grade. Like rock climbing, and we had to do our own harness and stuff. Pet teacher, supposedly, checked it after we were done to make sure it was done right. One day my neighbor broke an arm and leg because she wasn't properly strapped and fell. This was at an international American school in Egypt around year 2000, for all those wondering what type of school does rock climbing. Watching my kindergarten teacher die of cancer. He just kept getting skinnier and paler and more exhausted, and eventually he just didn't show up anymore, and that was that. Didn't understand it then, obviously. In 2nd grade I remember having a teacher that was pregnant, like really pregnant, and one day she showed up not pregnant, and she seemed to be acting oddly. She miscarried twins on a Friday and showed up for class on Monday. Now that's being committed to your job. Later that year he husband wrapped his truck around a light pole, shit-faced drunk. She still showed up for class. In my childhood, my neighbor often hired us to help around the garden. When I turned 10, he asked me to come up and help pick the green beans. I went up in some red shorts. While I worked at picking the beans, I happened to glance back at him. I saw this weird jerking motion in his pants. Since I grew up in rural Tennessee in the 70s, I had absolutely no idea what was taking place. I just turned away and continued picking beans. Picking green beans requires a lot of bending over, and I wore very short red shorts. You can figure out what took place, I don't need to spell it out. Edit, I'm a 58-year-old male. Getting chased by a hippo while in a small motorboat. I was only like 8 at the time, but I thought it was very fun. Meanwhile my parents were basically shitting their pants. Edit, wow, this got more attention than I thought, lol. The context was my family hired a guy with a boat to bring us around the Okavango Delta. Calling him a guide would be generous. He was just a guy with a boat, and we got a bit too close to a lone male hippo. Chaos ensued. Hippos are utterly terrifying. I would died of fright. My babysitter was running late to take me to piano lessons and rear-ended an old man at a stoplight. She told me that he must not have noticed because he didn't get out of his car. I thought nothing of it, and she drove away and took me to my piano lesson. I forgot about it, and it didn't click until I remembered the incident years later, that I had been unknowingly involved in a hit and run. My mom holding what I thought to be sugar cubes and was mad because she didn't give me any after returning to the car with them at an unknown sketchy trailer where she left me in the car alone for seemed like an hour. I had no sense of time as a child. It was drugs. I was wondering who else has drug memories that only made sense later. I can honestly say my children have probably only seen someone smoking crack out a light bulb, tying off, or cooking on a spoon, and lighter a few/no times in their short lives. I saw one of those probably every day and thought nothing of it. It never even registered it as unusual or worthy of note. Early 90s New York City was something else. I hope you and your family are well and safe today. That's a very scary memory for a little child to have. When I was young and my parents were away, I had to sleep at my grandfather's. A sleepover that I always really enjoyed because he spoiled me very much. I also liked the fact that each day my uncle came over for a few hours for some coffee. It was something I usually enjoyed. Because my uncle and I have the same weird name, so it created a bond between us. Years later the same uncle called my dad and my aunt and told them my grandfather had sexually abused him as a kid for 16 years. Every time he came by when I was sleeping over, it was to check if my grandfather didn't do something horrifying to me. Until now I never had the change to thank him, as he has a huge trauma and broke all contact with my parents. But when I realized that all that time he was there just to protect me, I couldn't say anything for a few minutes. It hurted him so much to be there. If I would had known then, I would had get my stuff at my grandfather's and run away with my uncle. Edit. Sorry, but English isn't my first language. I'm not that good in grammar. A girl in my 5th grade class tried to commit suicide while class was in session. I watched as I saw her fill her bag with a lot of heavy books, put her head up over her chair, and put the book bag handle around her neck to choke herself. She was removed from class and I didn't see her for months afterwards. At the time I didn't really understand what she was trying to do. I thought it was all for attention. In junior high, a girl I had a crush on turned to me in class and asked me if I wanted to see something, and then opened her wrist lengthwise with a pair of scissors. In kindergarten my friend Mike's dad used to pick us up, and he always had a cooler of beers on the front seat with him. Would casually sip from cans as he drove. Depending on how old you are, this might have been considered okay at the time. No one was really concerned about DD back in the 70s. I know it sounds horrible, but we didn't even have baby car seats as mandatory. I held my infant baby sister in my 5-year lap in the back seat. Pretty much everything about my early childhood now seems quite alarming. Lawn darts. Lead content in garden hoses. Nurses and doctors smoking in hospitals. Okay, this went away before I entered junior high, but I remember walking past a cloud of smoke from what I assume was a break room on my way to get stitches from a lawn dart incident. That last sentence is so 70s, I think my pants turned into bell bottoms. I saw a mom and her little daughter get shot in a nice neighborhood cafe across the street when I was shopping for shoes with my mom as a kid. I was old enough to know it was terrible, but it didn't quite sink in until much later. Ex-boyfriend shot them and then himself. My town's swim instructor would always make fun of the boys, anywhere from ages 6 to 13 or so, for wanting to change in the stalls and not out in the main changing room area where he was with his clipboard. He was eventually arrested when a computer tech found child porn on his laptop when he took it in for some repairs, and thanks to the trial we learned that he was filming us with a little camera attached to his clipboard. Also, that he had been molesting a disabled boy that was in his care. What the duck? We need a grandma with a baseball bat.